talks. So I can give this to Sean. We're going to finish off today's session with Stephen Walker, who has the distinction of being the originator of this entire series. Somebody said earlier on, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that's entirely true here, because this is you finding your tribe and creating a tribe and creating a space for other people to find their tribe. So without further ado, Stephen is very well known to all of you and to those of us who work academically in the field of the study of early Celtic art and Celtic art in general. And the title of his paper is Sons of Women and Smiths and Wizards, a Celtic Jeweller's Story. Stephen, thank you. And you have your own clock ticking.
Okay, yeah, I have a workshop in a few minutes. But anyway, the reason I chose this title, back when I was a preteen, 10, 11 years old, my hobby was doing magic tricks. I really liked performing. I liked doing things that people thought were difficult or impossible. And it, I'd get called to do, talent shows and things like that, perform at parties. And it was an enthusiasm, but it was also kind of a childish enthusiasm. I remember this one girl once, she said, your tricks, they're all fake, and I thought, maybe I should work on doing something a little more real. But let's see, I'll move to, there we go. This is, the early work I'm going to show you is maybe a little primitive, a little crude, so I'll show you some of the stuff we're doing now. And I say we, I don't work alone. I work with 5 other craftsmen, 2 of which came with me. Sydney's not feeling well today. She seems to be getting a cold, and John's out chipping away at some stones. But these are the kinds of things we do now. We do a lot of Celtic rings. We do them in gold. We do them in silver. We do bracelets and quite a lot of other things. And, this has been my career for more than 50 years now. So let me tell you about where I'm from. I mean, from New York, right? The Big Apple. Well, no. This is the village in New York where I'm from. Actually, Nick, who's doing the video, he took this drone picture. This is Nick's house right here. So, and my workshop is in this building down on Main Street. I think it's actually behind that tree. But in terms of where this is in the world, there's a map of New York State. Andover's the purple star. New York's down here in the corner. You'll see we're actually closer to Toronto than we are to New York City. There's just to put it in scale of Ireland. This is, it's 5.5 hours to get to Newark Airport, where we flew out of on Sunday. Anyway, as a child, my mother was in a bagpipe band, and this is my mother here when she was about 20 years old, and she was the pipe major of the Glengarry Girls Bagpipe Band. Her father, my grandfather, was a Scottish immigrant, and this was a big part of his social life. Was the Scottish immigrant community that put on Highland Games every year and had lodge meetings, and that photo of me is probably the first time I ever put on a kilt, which was actually my mother's band uniform. As I finally got big enough, I'd fit it. But I was, enthusiastic about that part of our family culture. And about the time of 1968, my grandmother on my Walker's side, not her mother, but my other grandmother, went to Ireland on a church trip, and she came back with a little souvenir book of the Book of Kells that she gave me, and it was really kind of a life-changing thing for me, because I thought it was beautiful. I liked it. I liked drawing. I tried drawing stuff like that, And just a few weeks later, I went to a birthday party to a boy in my class who was turning 11, and his father was William Scotty McCrae, who, there he is. He was a school teacher in Andover. I didn't live in Andover yet. I lived in the next village over in Alfred, New York. And he was painting his mailbox, and he was painting a little interlaced thistle on it and doing kind of a unsealed lettering on his mailbox. And I recognized what it was because my grandmother had just introduced me to this a few weeks before. And they took me in the house and showed me some of his sculpture, which is these things here, like this. It's called, he referred to them as ensemblages. And they're different pieces of wood that are carved, and assembled. So it's kind of a multi-material. Sometimes there'd be other materials besides wood. And I'd been doing my own work for many years. I realized I'm sort of doing these assemblages on a jewelry scale. But Alec McCrae, who's not in the room right now, but I think he's taking a workshop or something, right? He is Scotty's grandson, and he's followed in his grandfather's tradition. There's a great, nice piece of his wood carving out in the gift shop out here. So anyway, there was a pipe band forming with McCrae's sons, and a lot of my other friends were joining this. And so I joined this pipe band, started learning to play the bagpipes when I was 13 years old. And this became my social life as a teenager. And because so many of the people were artistic, we started making a lot of our own things, and I started making dirks. And, actually we were all making dirks. Boys, we get to wear a big knife when we play the bagpipes. So we made these things, and I also found that I liked making money. So being good at making dirks, I made more of them and sold them. And I don't usually tell anybody that anymore because they might want me to make one, and they are a lot of work. And I find it's much more rewarding to make jewelry or make some of the other things I make. So I was really in business by the time I was 15, selling things I make. And because I picked up these sort of silversmithing skills, I started making jewelry. And here's some rings that I made back in those days. These were all ones that my mother had. So this is a new picture. Back in the 70s when I was doing this work, the photographs of them are terrible. We went through some of our old albums, and actually the one up in the corner on the hand, that is one of the original photographs. But you'll notice this wire, curly wire filigree work. Actually, the workshop I'll be teaching right immediately after this is about spiraling wire and doing that sort of thing. So here's some other things from the early days of my work. Actually, I have that brooch in my pocket here. This is one I gave my mother for Christmas. I don't know, probably in 1975 or something like that. But it's a little penannular brooch. It's made so it can be worn either front or back. You can pass that around. And about this same time, a friend of mine who was kind of a vagabond, a few years older than me, he had been living in London, and he had made a trip to Scotland and to Iona specifically, and he brought back a little handful of the pebbles from the beach on Iona, and he and gave them to me. I was about 16 years old, and he was at that birthday party also. He was kind of the entertainment at the party. He played piano and sang silly songs and stuff. But and the ring there is being modeled by one of girls I used to hang around with back in high school. Actually, I still see her. I took that picture just a few weeks ago. I made things out of these pebbles. These pebbles are actually from a much more recent trip, just last April, but it kind of gives you an idea. And there's a big tradition of using stones from Iona. So after I got out of high school, I went to, my idea was to go to Scotland. I had fantasies about finding somebody I could do an apprenticeship with. And, but I just charged off there, put my bagpipes and my kilt and some other, sleeping bag, and went off on my way. I circled through London on the way over, and wound up staying in London for a couple of weeks, and everyone said, you should take your bagpipes and go busking. And I'd never even heard of busking before. Growing up where I did, that wasn't really a thing. So I started doing that and found out, I can do okay with this. And so after a couple of weeks of busking, I went up to Scotland, went to Iona, spent about a couple of weeks there. It was kind of getting into the autumn of 1975 at this time, and never really connected with actually, these are the people I was looking for. Now this is Alexander and Euphemia Ritchie, who ran Iona Celtic Jewelry. I couldn't really connect with them because they died in 1940. And their apprentice is this young man here, Ian McCormick. And I would have loved to have met him on that trip, because he was kind of carrying forward this tradition, and he was an art teacher also, so he may have been sympathetic to what I'd had in mind. And years later, I wound up finding out about him and writing a letter to him. I'd been told he had Alzheimer's and wasn't really very responsive to much of anything, but I wrote him a letter. I asked him if he knew George Bain, if he'd ever visited, just questions about the history of their business and the evolution of the Iona school of modern Celtic jewelry. And he wrote me a beautiful letter back. And when I visited Iona after that, I met his cousin, Vari Killen, and told her about this letter, and she seemed very skeptical. She said he was out of his mind with Alzheimer's. He couldn't have written that letter. So I made a photocopy of it and sent it to her, and she showed it to Ian's wife, and she said Ian's wife cried. So it may have been the last lucid thing he ever did in his life, was write me this letter. And it congratulates me for carrying on the tradition, which that very, very encouraging for me. That was many years later, but this is the kind of thing that the Ritchies were doing. And there's, the pebbles and use of pebbles on Iona is a continuing thing. So anyway, I got back, went to art school, first at Syracuse University and then at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. And I wanted to learn to be a, silversmith making hollowware. I already had some jewelry making skills. And I did pursue that. And these are some things I made as a student. All three of these are chalices, obviously. And the one up here with the colors of, that's all pierced out and silver soldered together. It's called marriage of metals, or married metals. And if you turn the pattern around and look at the back, you see the same size, same pattern. So this mixing of metals and different colors of metals became kind of a theme for the rest of my life, still is a theme. And I started talking about, this is a piece I showed Ed earlier. These are tessellating, this is a tessellating pattern where this shape could repeat itself all over an entire sphere. And wasn't sure whether it should be clockwise or counterclockwise, because inside you see it one way, outside you see it the other way. I made it each way, so it's kind of balanced as both things. These are about 5 inches in diameter or so. And And they're made of silver, brass, bronze, nickel silver, which is makes the gray-white contrast, and brass and bronze. So there's 5 different alloys there, each a different color. Now I also, the women start getting involved in my life a little more. I made this brooch for my wife, who was here earlier, Susan. I didn't give her, she's sort of like the barefoot cobbler, or the cobbler's children that are running barefoot. She never has had a diamond. And it's become kind of an ongoing joke that, she's never going to have a diamond. But for our engagement, this is her engagement ring, which is a ring brooch based on the pseudopenannular brooch. And she was wearing that today. Some of you may have seen it. And as I got out of school, I started making a lot of things with this mixed metals. There's a secondary technique called mokame gane, which is originally a Japanese technique. And I made lots of things out of that. Here's a couple of pairs of earrings you can have a look at, pass around. Nothing especially Celtic about it at all. This bracelet with the Iona stone in it, that's much more recent. That's only like 5 years old, but these bracelets were the kind of thing I did. So this is me in the 1980s as I've gone into business on my own, and I'm tapping away, making things every day. And I'm going to arts festivals. And this was my life. These are 2 of my daughters. And I'd be in a little booth selling my stuff. This is actually at Disney World in Florida. And you see some others. It's called the Festival of the Masters. You're only allowed into it if you've won a primary award in some of the other festivals. So did that for a few years. And I was continuously trying to make my hollowware, my bigger pieces, trying to get some traction with them in terms of like the art world. And in 1992, one of the pieces I did was won a major design competition, for sort of art metalsmiths. And as a result, was on the cover of Metalsmith magazine, which is it's a Society of North American Goldsmiths magazine. This is the kind of thing, this is where I wanted to be, on the cover of Metalsmith. I felt like I'd really made it.
Rolling Stone.
Yeah, that's the way I felt. Like cover of the Rolling Stones. Except what I learned is it impressed other craftsmen, but it didn't really impress my customers very much. In fact, one of the first times I went to a festival after that, I had proudly displayed the magazine in my booth, and before the show opened, some other metalsmith came over. Oh, that's so wonderful! I'd love to have you. If you got any other copies, I autographed one for her. I felt like a rock star. And then an hour later, after the show came in, a guy picked it up and he opens it up. He said, "What is this?" He thought it was a catalog of my work, and I told him what it was, and he just put it back and was unimpressed. But our local newspaper did a story about me and the photographer who took it, because the photographer was kind of an upstart also, and and we actually got more business because of the local newspaper coverage of this national coverage. And so what I really learned from this is that trying to make it in the sort of official world of things like glossy magazines and galleries and organizational things, if I'm going to make it on my own, I got to find my own audience, and that's really where I went. So I started making. 1992, when that magazine cover happened, there were several other very significant things that happened to me, and we had our 4th child was born. He had meningitis, which was a big deal, helicoptered up and week in the hospital. And I also quit drinking coffee. Actually, he's doing very well. He's married, he's engineer, he's got people headhunters chasing him all the time, trying to get him to take a different job. But I quit drinking coffee, which turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life, because now I could carve really small. I always had a very unsteady hand because I loved coffee. I drank way too much coffee. But once I quit drinking coffee, I could start carving. And this little, ad up here in the corner, that was run in Smithsonian Magazine. Now in 1992, Celtic design was starting to become popular in a very broad way. And there weren't very many people making Celtic jewelry that could, could deliver it, make it affordable either. So I started going into, making multiples of these things. I would carve them in wax. There's special carving wax. And then cast one in metal. Actually, I'd do this through a contractor. I'd send them out to a casting house. And then we would get it back, finish it, clean it all up, rubber mold it, and then you can make multiples. Then you can finish multiples, make them in different sizes. And with just 3 or 4 different designs, I was able to have a pretty good business. And these little tiny ads in the back of Smithsonian Magazine were just lighten up the phone. I'd get letters in the mail. We used 1 Main Street's our address. Sounds legitimate. You're trying to sell jewelry, especially the expensive jewelry, through the mail. You've got to have some credibility, and 1 Main Street worked. And because it really was a boiler room operation. This was just practically a delinquent or a derelict kind of a business, very much not a happening kind of Main Street commercially anymore, but it's getting better now. So we sold quite a lot mail order. I continued to go to these arts festivals, but this was very encouraging for me. We also started publishing little catalogs of these. It's about the same size as these, it's about that size. And every year we did one, and we always put the picture of the family in there and gave a little background of, why are we doing this? And I tried to keep it real as possible rather than go with some very esoteric thing about, imaginary Celtic fantasies or anything. No, my grandmother, my grandfather, people like that. So you can see my growing family. Eventually we had 6 children. We always had a dog. This little girl here is now my business manager. This guy here is just had a baby himself. His wife had a baby about 3 weeks ago. So here's some more of the catalogs, and we, eventually we added more and more ring designs. And one of the things I did is I made them continuous. Other people that were making these rings tended to have a blank spot to make sizing easier. And I said, no, it's got to be all the way around, which meant I had to make master patterns for all the different sizes. You can stretch them a little bit in between sizes, but it was a big investment for each new design. But they tended to go, because of that, I was doing pretty well. Bagpipes continue to be part of my life. We, bagpipe band kind of shrunk down to just a couple of guys. Well, you can see like 4 guys here. And this is Main Street in Andover. 4th of July is one of the biggest things in Andover. I did not go to the Insular Art Conference last year because 4th of July is also my mother's birthday. And I had the feeling it might be her last birthday, and it was. She was 94, so I'm glad I was there with her. So one of the things I also did was make bagpipe ferrules, the silver on these bagpipes. Another one of the pipers from the original band became a bagpipe maker. He made very good bagpipes, African blackwood, and the white material is American elk antler, which is from sheds. The elk throw their antlers off every spring or every winter, and the Boy Scouts go out and collect them, and then they sell them to people that have things to do with them. So here are some of the other things we do, some things we make. And I started working with other people. This is 1 Main Street after we fixed it up a little bit better, because the way that ad worked is people started showing up. one Main Street sounds like there should be something there, and there, there was a filthy workshop with, very unorganized and dust on everything. And this one man showed up one day. He was an older man. He was out front. And I thought social services had found him an apartment in Andover. And I crossed the street. I was running to the post office to mail something off, and post office right across the street. And when I came back, he's still there, and he had this magazine. He said, "Do you know where Walker Metalsmiths is?" Because there was no sign or anything. And I said, "Yeah, that's me. It's right here." And he looked so disappointed because he was expecting a nice jewelry store. And so I brought him in, and his girlfriend showed up from somewhere, and I found the rings in silver that fit them. And I thought he was going to balk at $40 each because I still have social services in my head. And he said, "Well, we really want them in gold." And it turned out I had both of them in gold, in the right sizes. And I'm thinking, do you have any idea what this is going to cost you? And next thing you know, he's peeling $100 bills off this great big wad of money. And then he asked me where he could park his camper overnight. He had this big land yacht Winnebago that he parked across the street as he'd driven from Massachusetts. And I called the local campground, which was closed, but they made accommodations for him. And but after that, we started having people showing up, and not every day, but more and more frequently. And so it got embarrassing not to have a store, so we tried to kind of create one. I drifted away from the Mokame for a while, but I kind of got back into it in the early 2000s, and I did a lot of these landscape sort of Mokame things. And here's a few pieces of Mokame you can look at. This one here is sort of delaminating on the end, so just be careful you don't. Well, here's how it starts. It's a stack. This is the edge of a brick of Mokame. Laminated billet, we call it. And that'll get hammered down thin. I'll show you some slides of how that goes. Then it gets upset, you grind through it to expose the inner layers like wood. You can get kind of like a bullseye wood pattern. This might be a little hard to read in the dark, but this is a very fine wood grain pattern in the bigger piece. And these, it's about the same 5 alloys we talked about before. What we do is we clamp it between some steel plates. So if you look up here, this picture, these are steel plates with big bolts going through them. There's 8 bolts, and then there's a 3 by 6 inch block that weighs about 14 pounds of maybe 30 or 40 sheets of metal alternating. Take the bolts off, and I had this big industrial power hammer that's like 1914 is when that machine was made. And we'd hammer that down while they're hot. They all stick together usually, most of the time. You can see there's a little delamination in that one. And then there's a couple of ways of making it work. You can saw it up in straight strips, or you can dimple it and sand off the high spots. And now here's a bowl I made in about 1998 maybe, and you might recognize the Children of Lear story here. And this was one of the most elaborate pieces I ever worked on. And it was a real labor of love. It got a lot of attention. It was the centerpiece of a major show at the National Ornamental Metals Museum, but it did not sell. It helped sell jewelry. People would see this and they'd say, going back to this, wizards thing. I mean, Mokame is a difficult process. Bagpipes are have a reputation for being difficult. So I guess I was kind of going for that sort of wizard thing. Do stuff that's not easy, and then try to do it well. And this did help sell a lot of jewelry. And I think I really kind of felt like the mission was accomplished when I was at a festival, and someone who must have been another metalsmith. She didn't really identify herself. She came in and she looked at the bowl in the case and she said, "Is that married metal? Is that mokume?" I said, "Yeah, it is." And she said, "That's just not possible. I must be hallucinating again." And then she spun on her heels and walked away. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of what I was going for. So anyway, here's the bowl that's on display out here. And this kind of ties a few things together. It's, this is a map of the Isle of Iona, and it's supposed to illustrate the story of St. Columba and the Heron, which is kind of an exile story. And there's this whole thing about being beyond the ninth wave. Well, there's 9 waves here. Here's the cross from St. Columba's pillow. The heron is kind of lost in the glare over here. You might be able to see him in the next slides. Yeah, the heron's kind of hard to read. There's also a dolphin here. In the summer of 2000, I took my family to Iona for a week. And while we were there, we saw a pod of dolphins in the Sound, which I guess are quite, you can tell it was not a common thing to happen because we were at the Martyrs Bay restaurant, which overlooks the Sound, and the whole place just stopped. Even the kitchen staff came out and looked at them. This wasn't a daily occurrence there. And my youngest son, who was 14 months old, claims that that's his first memory. He remembers that. My first memory was, something involved my grandparents, and it's a, very pleasant memory, but to have your first memory be dolphins on Iona, that's pretty, I'm jealous. But anyway, the landscape here, I tried to, all of these hills, if you knew your geography around that part of the Hebrides, you'd be able to identify these peaks as the different mountains and islands and the shoreline of Mull. So it's, it was an ambitious work. Earlier, somebody made reference to Mia Cranwell, who's the Irish metalsmith of the early 20th century. And I was kind of thinking of her when I did these chased bits on overlay. And if you look at it, actually, I didn't get one that sort of shows the bottom. There's quite a lot going on the bottom. Alexander Ritchie did a lot of, if you go to eBay and look up Alexander Ritchie pieces, you'll see a lot of these, I guess they're dolphins or some kind of sea fishy sort of thing that nobody seems to want to buy them because, his stuff is very sought after, except for that design. Anyway, the feet of this piece are made by that dolphin. So going onward, this is the last bowl I made, which I actually made for my 25th anniversary for me and my wife. It's got these representing our children and our love for life, and there's 25 of the triquetras around the perimeter. Made a mokume of this white and gray mokume is silver and nickel silver together, which I found out is a difficult thing to stick. I had to scrap quite a lot of it to get enough to make it work. And that's actually on display in our showcase. Now, in 2004, my daughter really, she remembered, she got very nostalgic about when we used to go to arts festivals. So 2024, we went to arts festivals, and she and her friend, my apprentice, and we did a bunch of them. This picture's probably taken about 2001, maybe, as the family with all the children is together. And my wife, she didn't get a diamond. One of the things that I think is kind of nice is, even though I'm a jeweler, she wasn't especially interested in that about me when I was starting out. So she wasn't she wasn't marrying me because she thought she could get stuff. I mean, she got children, of course, but she did get stuff. She was kind of famous for her hair. which sadly she has lost, but I made quite a few of these hair barrettes for her. Some of these are just ones she kind of took out of the more common ones, but most of those were specially made for her. As my granddaughter modeling the Mokame one with a little sort of Celtic bird head. There's kind of a triquetra. Maybe you can see it over here, kind of tucked in there. Now, the multiples I was talking about, we're now doing all that in-house, and like these are the rubber molds for making those. There's you can pop that right out, but it just takes a minute to make a wax model. That way you can open that up if you want to play with. Don't worry about wrecking the wax. I'm not going to take it home and do anything with it. But those of you that saw the thing on chip carving, this little tiny cross was done as a chip carved piece as the original, but then we're reproducing it using completely different molding technique. And then the rings are kind of a little more fun to do the molds, because this is made into a solid block of rubber, and then you have to go in with a scalpel and cut the parting lines. But the ring, in order to make it work right, you kind of have this little pull around thing to get the ring out. So that's a lot of my time is spent making models and then making new molds. I think that's the last pass around thing I've got. But this is the master pattern for this, which has been cut out of the block with this channel left, the sprue we call it, to the button former. And we'll make multiple injections of multiple pieces. So it's really something of a jewelry factory at this point. And we'll put them together into a tree, which gets put in this flask, as you can see over here, which is filled with plaster. Then it's put in the kiln, melted out. Sometimes that whole kiln is just packed with, maybe up to 18 flasks in it. And this is a casting machine, centrifugal force casting machine. And we'll heat the metal up with a torch and poke it with a stick till we know it's right, and then let it spin. Can't really see the spin. This is kind of exciting because there's fire and motion and stuff. And when you get it done, the mold is still hot when you start. You quench it in a bucket of water, and the violence of the thermal shock kind of blasts it off, and then you get this tree of what's now silver or gold pieces, which we can go forward with that's a 1 day's casting. We usually do this once a week, typically. Lately we've been doing a little more than once a week. And then there's a lot of, the real work starts at this point. Now you've got to clean it up, add the parts that, if it's earrings, you have to solder the posts on. You've got to, polish it, obviously. This is a laser welder that's used for some of the steps of certain pieces. And there's several rings out there that had a lot of laser welder things involved. We've gotten a little more high tech also. We've added CAD, computer-aided design and 3D printing, as well as laser engraving. And but on the other, and then we do things that are completely hands-on also. So here's the staff of Christmas a few years ago. Sydney's here. not in this room, but she came to the conference. She's actually the only one of the craftsmen at that point that's still with me. They've, the other two women have both, one had a baby and is staying home. The other guy retired. I didn't know jewelers could retire. So I thought the true meaning of the endless Celtic knot was that a Celtic jeweler's work is never done, but apparently he wasn't in it that deep. Here's our current staff. John, who's sitting in the back row, is here. Sydney, me, and these three are apprentices here. These two are both going to some advanced stone setting training in a couple of weeks. Dog comes to work every week. More of the things we do, a lot of cross pendants. We've been very lucky that people like those so much. And also rings. When I show you these, I did not make all of these. Someone in my shop made each one of them, and sometimes they used components that I had made. So some of this is sort of a team effort. But we have the photography and the marketing is quite a lot of fun for all this too. So we've, in fact, actually Nick is here helping with that. There's Nick. So then started doing key pattern rings after the last International Day of Celtic Art conference. Michael Carroll gave us some encouragement about how to do key patterns, and I made several rings that I'm doing in all the different sizes now. So to have a continuous pattern like that, I think I had to make 8 model sizes in order to cover, the normal range of human finger variations. And Sydney, just the bracelet out there with key patterns, she hand carved those just last week. I cast those on Friday. I know it was kind of a rush. The model here is actually our staff photographer these days. That's Maddie. And these are continuing with the multicolored gold. It's silver, yellow gold, and rose gold. It makes a nice contrast. Now in 2018, the walk-in business had grown to the point that our tiny little workshop wasn't really working out too well. So we wound up acquiring the building across the street, on the left-hand side of the white door there, and redid the inside. We did the mayor came for this unveiling. There's my granddaughters and my mom and behind my wife there. And this used to be the village office, and my mom was she was the village clerk. So she worked in that building, we think, longer than any other person ever has in the entire life of the building, which is about 30 years. It was built as a bank, which is kind of nice because it's got a walk-in vault. I hated that door, so we made a live edge wood door. Actually, my son did that. That was his COVID project. And it's got a nice feel to it. We sell some other things besides the things we make. There's other giftware, like these crosses up on the wall, and a few other sorts of nice things. I was able to find an original George Bain rug, hunting rug, and that's proudly displayed in the store. It adds a great feel to it. There's a better picture on the left of the new front door, and the carving over the top of the front door is something that Alex did just last fall, I think it was, last October. And I'm going to take you through the process of making my most recent ring, frame ring I call it, because it's kind of like the assemblage of Scotty McCrae. I actually made the frame on the computer and printed it. You can see here is the printed model. These are injection wax rings. You can put multiple pieces, of course, in one flask. So there they are cast on the, and these pieces here, we've got all these little things we've made, little Lucky Charms we call them, jokingly, that they're little, some of them are knots, some of them are foliage, some of them are stone settings, a little different than the ones you can buy. But we'll make compositions of those and kind of wire filigree and assemble them using this laser welder. So here's the ring under several steps. As I actually set the stones and then welded the stone in the setting in place. There's a certain amount of symmetry, a certain amount of asymmetry to them. And I like to go and fill in the space, make a kind of a dense composition using this granulation of gold, little gold spheres, which are very easy to make just by melting the metal with a torch on a charcoal block. And there's the ring. That's I call it a mossy sapphire. It's sapphire material in the center, but not like the clear gemmy sort of stuff. It's like 12 carats or something like that. But then the 4 side stones are also green sapphires, which are more of the sparkly faceted stuff. You can see the different sizes of that, or different sides of it. And here is current staff at my shop, and that picture was taken, I don't know, a week ago maybe. And it's a nice spring day in Andover. So that's my life so far. Any questions at all, or?
It was the bowl.
Yeah.
With the 3 metals.
Yeah.
Like how?
Yeah. Well, you know how a soccer ball is made out of patches?
Yeah.
Because if you soldered it all together flat and then tried to shape it into a bowl, the solder seams wouldn't hold up.
Okay.
Now, a Mokame weld would, because that's a much more tougher bond. But what I would do is I would basically laid them out using Archimedean solid geometry, like, cubo-octahedrons and isododecahedrons, and it's been a while since I've thought in those terms. And then I'd then sort of fold them all up, and then you can kind of knock in the corners and punch out the belly. And then there's a lot of solder, a lot of sanding and grinding and such. Yeah, and then hammer it all out. One of the reasons I quit is because I was getting tendonitis from all the hammering. And the other is that just, even though they felt glorious to make, they just weren't paying the bills. They weren't pulling their own weight. So I found some other things fun to do that are. I've often wondered if I got inspired, if I could go back to it. But I'd have enough pain in my hands just doing the regular stuff after doing this for like 55 years. So anybody that's seeing this on our YouTube, our live broadcast, I'm telling you, I might not have that much time, so get down here and get it while the getting's good. So, they were fun. They were challenging. Actually, what I was told when I first went to school, which goes back to that kind of wizard thing, I sawed something out of metal. They didn't really know where to put me in the classes, and so I tried to show with a jeweler's saw that I was very skilled with it. And so the professor comes along and he said, well, "Okay, wise guy, trace that and then saw it out of it. I did it in brass, now cut it out of copper and then make them fit together." So I did. He said, "Okay, now you can solder them and that's what you call married metals." So I did it. The guy next to me said, "Well, could he make a bowl out of that or a cup or raise it?" And he said, "No, it wouldn't. It would break. Seams just wouldn't hold up to that." And they told us how a seam could be lap seamed, and it was all very technical. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't mean you can't make a bowl out this way. You just can't make it flat and then shape it. So I kind of challenge accepted, and it sent me down this road, which occupied me for probably the next 15 or 20 years.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Before you go, Stephen, just to say thank you very much for that very interesting autobiography. And just to end with the comment, your wife may not have got a diamond, but she got a rock.
Yeah, okay.
So, congratulations.
Thank you. Well, John and I have got to dash out and